Patrick Mahomes, as we said, we both gave him props. You know, all the guys, the NFL players that were in that video last Thursday night, the Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, OBJ, Odell Beckham Jr., several players, probably more than a dozen.
Right.
Yeah, it was a lot of big names, a lot of faces you recognized. And one of them, the biggest, obviously, Patrick Mahomes. And I salute Patrick Mahomes for stepping out and speaking up, and it was great. But, Rob, we've seen some columns written, and I just think they're a little, like, they've basically been praising Mahomes for what he did, and I think they're a little over the top.
Chris,
go ahead.
And we should say this real quick, because you remember we talked about it, and I wrote a column for Deadspin about where are the black voices. Do you remember? And then following that column, and he was one of the guys I mentioned, I think it was Dak, Russell Wilson, Mahomes,
Deshaun Watson,
and Lamar Jackson. And after that column came out, I'm not saying it was because I wrote it, but after the column came out.
You kind of
a little bit. I'll take a little bit. But three of them came out immediately with statements. And it was Mahomes, and it was Russell Wilson. And then Dak made $1 million donation to police training, and he made a statement.
Right.
And Deshaun Watson went to a march, right, in Houston, I think it was, Chris. And we still haven't heard from Lamar Jackson, but my point is that it was important that we heard from those guys, because prior to that, we had heard from white quarterbacks who were very outspoken, including Trevor Lawrence, who's in college,
right,
who felt compelled to say something and say, hey, can you listen to black people? I'm with the black people, basically.
Right. And Mahomes, like I said, we salute what he did, and it's great. And it'll be interesting to see what he does going forward if he wants to take that mantle on. But a lot of people in the NFL, Rob, kind of talking like it was just incredible what he did, and because he's the best player in the league, that they really, I thought, went a little overboard with the praise. But here's some quotes from one of the reports we're talking about.
That's right, guys. One of them quoted Doug Williams, the Super Bowl champion quarterback. He called
the first black man to win a Super Bowl as a quarterback.
He called it powerful, which, was a good compliment. But this is where it started to get a little bit over the top. In one article on Yahoo, a NFL employee said, quote, in a contract negotiation offseason, to have the courage to put his neck out on the line with the collective group is just really inspiring. That's one. I respect the hell out of that is another one. And last, in another ESPN article, a front office exec was quoted as saying, getting Mahomes to participate in that video was so big, end quote.
You want to take it first, Rob?
No, I'll let you take it first. I'll just let me give my little piece. I think sometimes people get carried away. Let me leave it at that. And Chris, you take it first.
Yeah, and look, like we said, I salute all the players, including Mahomes, for what they did. I think it was great for them to come together like that. But I think this over the top, what I would call over the top praise, is a sign of how low the bar really is. How little we expect of black athletes to be able to speak up. Patrick Mahomes is a human being. Most human beings, regardless of race, saw what happened to George Floyd and were appalled. And that's all that Patrick Mahomes did, was he said, I was appalled, essentially. You know what I mean? And he said, I'm appalled that it keeps happening. And I'm appalled that systemic racism is still in existence. Any human being should be able to voice their displeasure with an unjust situation. That's all that Patrick Mahomes and the players did. And I salute them, but I'm not going to act like, they just did something that was virtually impossible to do. So that's all I'm saying. I mean, Muhammad Ali did something. He took on the United States government. These guys, as great as what they did, they just said, look, we want the NFL to speak up on this. We want the NFL to say what half of America's saying.
And Chris, let me jump in.
That's all I'm saying.
No, and I get your point. And the other thing is, oh my goodness gracious, unbelievable, during a contract negotiation, this guy actually spoke out about a murder we saw committed, Chris, on the streets of Minneapolis in plain view.
Right.
In plain view. Oh, we can't give that guy a contract, even though he's the youngest player to have an MVP and a Super Bowl championship ever. We can't give him a deal because he pointed out an unjust and wrong thing in our society. Oh, my, what a terrible human being he is. Really?
Right.
Really? Come on.
Right.
I'm sorry. Ain't nobody thinking about their contract negotiations when you make a statement about what we just saw. Look at all the people in the streets. Look at everybody. If you're not outraged by that, what would it take to make you outraged and to speak out? What do I always say, Chris? The only people worse than the people doing the harm are the good people turn the other way and don't say anything. Yeah. They're worse because they know right from wrong.
And as I agree with you, Rob, and as I said, it's a sign of how, let's just look, we just got to keep it real. How black people have grown up in this country for generations biting their tongue. Biting their tongue. I can't say this because what will white people think of me? I can't say this because I might lose my job. I can't do this because I can't wear my hair like this. I can't. So it's so bad that when a black person does speak up, it's viewed as so courageous. And we're saying it's time to move past that. It's great that they spoke out, but that's the right of every human being. It's the right of every human being. And look, Colin Kaepernick did it and he lost his job. So I get the fear.
He's in a different situation than Patrick Mahomes. And here's the other thing too, Chris. The difference too is in his situation, Patrick he's at the top of the pinnacle as far as football. So I know people are trying to make a big deal about him being a part of it, but this is the reality. With or without him, the NFL would have spoke out, Chris, if he wasn't in that video.
Right.
There's no doubt in my mind this was the most blatant thing that could not be ignored. So I'm not buying like, oh, that was Roger Goodell saw the video and said, well, is Patrick in it? Okay, now we'll do something.
Right.
I don't believe that for 1 second.
Because they had a lot of big names. Michael Thomas, who's arguably the best receiver in the league, one of them. He was, and we mentioned the other names. Ezekiel Elliott, arguably the best running back.
OBJ,
Saquon
right.
Barkley.
OBJ is probably the biggest name outside of football. Do you know what I mean? Where people know who he is.
Right. And the other thing, and this is, I've said this plenty of times about black athletes, and Kaepernick, like I said, he paid the price for essentially speaking out. He obviously knelt down, did something more symbolic than just speaking out, but he paid the price. And I thought that made him even more courageous because he was expendable, right? He wasn't a star. Had Kaepernick done that right after going to the Super Bowl,
he would still be on the team, and people absolutely did. Right, Chris, 100%.
And that's where a Patrick Mahomes, because he's so good, he can say whatever he wants. He could kneel, and they wouldn't. I mean, let's be honest. If Patrick Mahomes knelt during the national anthem, there would be no issues.
Especially not in Kansas City, I'll tell you that.
Right.
Where they hadn't won a championship in 50 years, Chris.
Right. It's like LeBron James. There's the superstars on that level where they can say and do whatever they want. And you and I have talked about it. That we'd like them to use their clout and their power to do things like this. Not just speak out, but to do many other things, even more tangible things that can help progress the African American community and race relations.
And that's why we were so disappointed in Michael Jordan, because he was Teflon, he was bulletproof, Chris.
Right.
Even
no
at the time with the whole Harvey Dent and Jesse Helms, and he could have affected change in North Carolina. We all know Jesse
he was
Helms.
so good. People,
right?
And he said Republicans buy sneakers too. We don't know this for a fact. They would have bought his sneakers.
Yes.
Even if he spoke out in support of Harvey Gantt. They would have. And so you're right. He reached that level.
He was on that level where he wouldn't have been hurt by it. And the same thing here, even if you even thought about it, like, can you imagine if all this is going on and Patrick Mahomes still to this point hadn't spoken out or hadn't done anything? Do you think that would be favorable, or would that be a bad look for him?
It would be a bad look. And I think for him, because he is biracial, people would really question him. You know what I mean? Where is he at in terms of supporting African-American causes? Now, Lamar Jackson hasn't spoken out, which I'm surprised at.
I just don't get it either. I know, Chris, and I did when I was writing the column for Deadspin. I did look at some of his social media to try to see if he had said anything before I wrote it. You know what I mean? To make sure.
Right.
And most of his stuff was retweeting of other people, but he really, up until the point when I was looking at it, and this was almost a week ago, he didn't have anything. And I don't know, Rob G., have you monitored, have you seen anything from Lamar Jackson? Because, Chris, you haven't, right?
I have not.
I have not either, other than a few retweets. That's about it.
That's
it's interesting because he has spoken, he's been great in terms of speaking about his team, his teammates. And I'm not ripping him because, I guess we'll find out at some point why he hasn't said anything. But he usually, he's spoken out about a few things, football related.
Right.
And so it's a bit surprising, but, we'll see. We'll see what's holding him up. All right, let's get to the callers, Rob. 877-99 on Fox, 877-996-6369. Is Patrick Mahomes getting a little too much credit for speaking out against racial injustice? We'll continue the conversation with you next.
Brian in Virginia, you're on the Odd Couple, Fox Sports Radio. What's up, Brian?
What's going on, my man? Hey, look, I'm going to tell you, I look forward to y'all show every day, and I mean that.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Man, that means a lot to us, too.
Hey, no problem. And, Rob, I want to say one thing. That response you had toward Drew Brees, that's something that should have been required. I should have got that on tape, but I didn't.
We got it on tape. Awesome. Thank you, my man.
Rob saves all his takes on tape.
I got everything.
Word. But, so what I wanted to say about Patrick Mahomes, number one, in my opinion, if somebody says something, sometimes it's not enough. If somebody doesn't say anything, then they're not doing anything. And it's like, and a lot of times black people can't win. One thing I want to point out is nobody's talking about all the work Anquan Boldin is doing about this subject. He retired from football when his cousin got killed with the same issue with Brother George Floyd. And he's actually created an organization. He's going around making things happen. So sometimes you don't have to speak to make it happen. Nobody knows what Lamar Jackson is planning in a case like that. Nobody knows about that if he's not speaking. But speaking about it doesn't necessarily solve the problem. And I also want to say, I know George Floyd is the main brother in the business right now as far as what's going on in the world. But let's not forget Ahmaud Arbery. This is not that long ago about what happened.
Breonna
Taylor.
What
I mean?
Those names, all those people have been named. And you're right, because it just happened and the funeral just took place. So I do get it, Brian, but those people aren't forgotten. I've heard those names as well from people.
He's right, Anquan Boldin and Rob. I
covered his very first game in the NFL. Anquan.
Yep, he has done great stuff, and that's look. I know people, poo-pooed the NFL with the $90 million. And I'm not saying they couldn't do. I'm not saying they couldn't do more. But I know Anquan. I've talked with him about Inspire Change, and that's the organization he's working with. They have done a lot. They are in Florida and Georgia changing laws. And, I mean, they've done a great deal of stuff with this money from the NFL. So he's right. I got to salute Anquan.
All right, Kevin in Mississippi. You're on the Odd Couple, Fox Sports Radio. What you got, Kev?
Good afternoon, guys. How you doing?
Doing
great.
Good.
How are you?
Good. Love the show. Kudos to everything the previous caller just said. Just 3 quick points. First of all, yes, I think Mahomes is getting proper but too much credit. He wasn't the Lewis and Clark on this. He's following the path, but kudos to him for following the path. I think Colin Kaepernick, to me, was the one who made the stance when it wasn't popular. So when I look
he
at that,
had something to lose, you know what I mean? Like his career.
He had a lot to lose. And great point, Rob, because what I was going to say, I'm a big Saints fan, but when Drew Brees made his statement, as soon as the incoming came, he got up off of it and apologized. Colin said, well, look, I'm not moving off of it. I'm going to take the incoming. This is what I truly believe in, so I'm not going to move. Two big differences in the belief system. But the last thing I want to say is that I think if Colin's last name was not Kaepernick, but let's say it was Goldstein, and he was protesting, say, things that are happening in the Jewish community, like the burning of synagogues or something like that. And if there were other people of Jewish descent in the NFL, I think they would have coalesced around him, and they would have all been consolidated. I blame a whole lot of the players that are coming out right now. Where were they when Colin needed them at that point? If they all would have coalesced at that point,
Chris and I
not moving because he's right.
Chris and I have talked about didn't we? Both talked about this. We're with you, Kevin,
times.
That the players could have done something 4 years ago when Colin, if they had gotten together, and then there might not have been any casualties if they would have gotten together. But they have to do it together.
They could have just threatened, we're not playing until Kaepernick's back in the league. He deserves to be in the league.
And it would have happened.
They wouldn't have missed the game.
They would not have missed the game.
And they could still do that. If they really want to, they still could do that.
They have that power.
Yep. Maybe it remains to be seen whether or not they will. We'll see.
Hey, let's go to Kane in D.C. You're on the Odd Couple, Fox Sports Radio.
Hey, gentlemen, love the show as always, brothers.
Thank you.
I wanted to say, yes, Mahomes is getting a bit too much credit. And I think that he's getting a lot of credit, one, because his position in the NFL is being obviously the best quarterback in football. But also I want to say that I think it's because of the backlash that he got from the Trayvon Martin comment when he was in support of George Zimmerman. So I think that has something to do with him coming out as well, because he was such an important George Zimmerman, and online he was taking a beating. When people come out and they do stuff, that's when they get the credit. When you speak up, when it's not a given, and it's followed by actors like Kaepernick and Anquan Bolden and Dabo Swinney and Drew Brees, I want people to stop using that term. What people are saying is not foreseen. Or so I forgot what they call it. I forgot what they said, but what it was intentional and very precise. They did that on purpose, especially Dabo Swinney. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wore that shirt at a time like this on purpose, and there's no middle ground. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it on purpose.
Yeah, that shirt rubs me the wrong way. Like you had to convince me that all your clothes were dirty, that you would wear that shirt. Seriously, Chris, on that weekend of all.